to Interdependent Study, our podcast where we engage in the learning and unlearning work for collective liberation. I'm Damien.
And I'm Aaron. Thank you so much for joining us today. Each week, we'll bring something new to the table, discuss our thoughts and feelings about it through the lenses of who we are and where we can go for a more just society.
We want Interdependent Study to be a space where we're always learning with one another. And Aaron, you're up this week. What have you brought to the table today?
I am bringing Read This When Things Fall Apart, Letters to Activists in Crisis, which was edited by Kelly Hayes and recently published by AK Press. And again, many thanks to the good folks over at AK Press for sending us a couple of advanced reader copies.
Yes.
Because it was great to read.
Yeah.
This book was incredible. It is 20 letters plus an introduction and conclusion from Kelly Hayes. And there's so many voices giving practical advice woven together with history and theory and experience. There's heartbreaking moments in this. There are moments that offer healing paths through trauma. And there's a lot of great metaphors throughout that are really beautiful, but also full in the fullness of humanity. So beautiful, but also heartbreaking at the same time.
Yeah.
And as I said last week, at least half of these, but maybe more, could be their own episode.
Absolutely.
Individually.
Yeah.
But I want to bring you something that Kelly says in the introduction. She says, quote, "I know that work of justice and change making will continue. It always has. My concern as I write these words is that you are able to stay with us in this struggle as we fight for what could be. There are no fairy tale endings and no shortcuts. What we have is each other and our will to remake the world. I cannot tell you it will be enough because I do not know what the future holds." Which gives great context for why this book exists.
Yeah.
These letters are from people who are in the work creating a better world than the one that they found, the one that they were given. And we fight even when we don't know what the outcome will be.
Yeah.
We fight because the fight is important. And she goes on to say, quote, "However, I can tell you that we and the world are worth fighting for, and that there is love, hope, and purpose to be found in the pursuit of justice and in the work of collective survival. Yes, there is joy in struggle even as the world falls down. There is dancing amid the destruction." Wow. Which is a beautiful reminder that we're allowed to be fully human, and we can expect that from the rest of the letters in the book.
Yeah.
And it's definitely in there, in all of them. So, but that's enough introduction. Where do you want to start?
I love the use of the word beautiful there. This book is beautiful. This book is incredible. I cannot overstate that enough. I encourage everyone listening to read it. I think the insights and the wisdom offered in each of these beautiful letters is so helpful for all of us just as human beings, right? But certainly for all of us engaged in the work and all of us fighting our various struggles, whether those be personal or professional or certainly organizing and in movement work. And one of the things I think I appreciated the most about this book, and you kind of spoke to this a little bit, is just the candor and the vulnerability and the care that each of these authors had on full display in their letters, in sharing personal stories, personal connections to the struggles that they were facing and that we collectively face, and certainly in the practical wisdom and advice that they offered. For me, it just felt really real and validating.
Yes.
Especially just given the authoritarian and fascist times we find ourselves in right now. And so, this was a phenomenal book. I feel I'm so grateful for it and that we got a chance to read it. And like you said, there's probably way too much in this book for us to talk about just in one episode.
Yeah.
But here we are.
We're going to try.
We're going to try. We're living in those fascist times, so we're going to talk about this book. One of the letters in the book is by Shane Burley, who is an author, journalist, and filmmaker. And his letter is aptly titled, "Read This If You Want to Defeat Fascism," which I saw that and I was like, go on. Tell me more. And one of the things that Shane said about fascism was this, quote, "Fascist movements are built by capturing the frothing discontent of particular segments of the working class and contorting its sights away from the powerful and onto marginalized communities, confusing where oppression comes from and ultimately defending the ruling class. On the left, economic and social instability are viewed as barriers to human dignity and liberation. Fascism feeds on this same precarity, infusing it with what philosopher Baruch Spinoza named sad passions, such as desperate loneliness or envy, to create a manipulative emotional language about how it will alleviate our suffering. And I just sort of like paused when I read that, and I was like, it was like that meme of him shaking his head, that to the Leo. That's exactly what's happening. That's straight out of the playbook being used right now in 2025. And what's great about this letter, and certainly all of the letters, is the insights into what's going on and the naming of what's happening, but the lessons and the advice for what to do in spite of that, or as a result of that, or in the face of that, and how we work together to fight and defeat fascism and all of the social ills that we're facing.
Yeah, it's that letter from Shane Burley is one I think I'll come back to again and again.
Yes.
And it's such a clear illustration of what's happening now, as you pointed out.
Yeah.
And it's a reflection of what's been happening for decades to a certain extent, too.
Right.
This is just a particularly amplified version of what's been happening
Great point.
over a long time now.
Yeah.
But another letter that stuck out to me was Read This If You're Struggling with Your Mental Health by Aaron Goggins, who is an organizer with the Wild Seed Society and organized with Black Lives Matter DC. Not that long ago, although kind of long ago, depending on how old you are.
Yeah.
His letter is obviously about mental health and how we take care of ourselves, but also how we take care of one another in movement spaces.
Yes.
And he uses a quote or a concept from Dr. King about this creatively maladjusted, which Aaron says was never really been clear to him what that means. But he dives into what he thinks it means to him throughout the letter and kind of highlights it in a variety of ways. And so he says, quote, "Can you imagine a better definition of being creatively maladjusted than living outside the consensus reality? Add to that having the audacity not only to envision another world, but to act day in and day out as if that world is as real as the world other people live in. To organize well is to live on an alternative timeline in which we get free, and to start acting as if you already are." And this idea of creatively maladjusted and the way that Aaron talks about it here is amazing.
Yeah.
Because it illustrates how we are rejecting the current world in order to imagine and work toward a better one.
Yes.
As Aaron says there. And that visionary thinking is always a little outside the realm of what other folks see as normal. And so you get some funny looks
Yes.
when you start living that way, you start moving in that way, because it's outside of what the norm is. It's outside of what's acceptable, because you have to do that to find something better, to make a world, as Kelly said in the introduction, that is better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that letter was great. And in particular, I appreciate the use of Dr. King's concept there. It's one I was unfamiliar with too. I'd love to go back. Maybe that's a homework piece I didn't think of until this moment as you bring it up. Go back and see the context of Dr. King using that phrase, that concept. But Aaron's application of it in this letter, I think, was really beautiful.
Yeah.
And speaks to this idea of abolition and dreaming of a better world, as you put it. So that was a great one. Another one of the amazing letters in this that I feel like I took a lot from was from the great Miriam Kaba. Her letter was called "Read This If You're New and Trying to Find Your Way."
Yeah.
And she talks about her practice and beliefs about hope, and how hope is a discipline that guides her, which we've talked about here on the podcast. I've always loved and appreciated and learned so much from her about that and from that. And in this letter, though, she weaves in some of the lessons she's learned and that have continued to influence and guide her work.
Yeah.
So she says, quote, "I have learned a lot from Joanna Macy's concept of active hope. For Macy, active hope doesn't require optimism. We can cultivate it no matter how we are feeling. For example, you can cultivate hope while you grieve, while you feel despondent, and so on. Hope makes room for itself beside every emotion. Hope is not the belief that everything will turn out well. That's optimism, and I'm not an optimist." I loved that. And then she goes on a little bit later to say, "I'm also interested in how Joan Halifax invites us to lean into uncertainty and the unknown as we practice what she calls wise hope. We are always going to be surprised in good and bad directions. That grounds me. I know things change all the time, even though I never know what direction that change will take. I don't know how things will turn out, but I'm committed to something other than this, the current structure and state of the world. We can live differently. I don't think we have to live the way we currently do. I think something else is possible. And I love this in this moment because it connects beautifully to what you talked about with Aaron's letter and what we talk about here. And so that's great. But I just found myself sitting with this letter and thinking, like, here I am learning more from Miriam Cabo about the power of hope and hope as a discipline. And now these new concepts to me of active hope and wise hope. And I just thought in the moment and think now that there's a lot of power in these concepts in terms of, as you said, dreaming about a new world and a new normal and a new possibility for all of us that isn't what we currently have. And of course, then fighting for it.
Yeah, that letter was obviously one of my favorites too.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the way that she writes, like she's weaving together other people's thoughts into something new.
Yes.
She's creating new visions and theories from the work of others to bring forth something to offer us in the present, whether that's a further crystallization of something she's already been thinking or, you know, a new updated version of that complicates it and adds more life to that concept. And so I've really noticed it, as particularly in the quotes you just mentioned, of she's sort of, it's almost like quilting. Like she's creating something new out of the fragments of other people's thoughts and ideas that inspire her.
And she's just so good at it.
Really great.
Yeah.
And kind of connected to that, I want to talk about this quote from Read This If You Are a Discouraged, Incarcerated Organizer by Stevie Wilson. So Stevie says, quote, "Reading movement history will remind you that you are not alone. You are not the first to be harmed, and you won't be the last. You have a rich history to draw inspiration from. Spend time studying it. It will lift your head and heart. Read about the Angola Three. Learn how they kept going despite being framed and locked in solitary for decades. Read about black communists organizing workers in 1930s Alabama during the height of Jim Crow and the Great Depression." And I think it's so important to understand our history. So here Stevie is talking in particular about incarcerated history and the organizing that incarcerated folks do, and that being really powerful to understanding how you are operating in the moment, particularly as he's speaking directly to discouraged incarcerated organizers.
Right.
And I think what's applicable for me here for everybody is that there's always people who came before who are doing something that you are doing.
Yes.
They made a path somehow that we're now following them on, and maybe we don't know who they are, but we're on their path.
Absolutely.
And we can find, I think, hope in that and strength and a collective sense of community, even through history, where I can take inspiration from that. And so, you know, learning about folks like John Brown or William Lloyd Garrison, those kinds of people, it's inspiring because you understand, okay, there have been people who have been creatively maladjusted in the past who have not accepted what the status quo is.
Yes.
So what does it look like for me to do that in my way?
Yeah.
I might not raid Harper's Ferry in quite the same way that John Brown did, but what is it that speaks to me in the way that he was creatively maladjusted to that? And so we can find hope in all of those, in those histories and those stories, and we can create our own version of that path and then also bring others along with us.
Absolutely. Well, we've talked about the importance of that history before, and I think one of the other things, and so that's important, I want to name that. The other thing I want to name that I think you've done a beautiful job here of is name the fact that all of these letters aren't necessarily specifically for us. I mean, this letter's a letter for discouraged, incarcerated organizers, and that's not us, but I still found myself learning something in every single one of these letters, whether or not it is something I experienced. There are letters in this book to parents. I'm not a parent, but there was beauty in those letters and lessons that I learned from them. Obviously, I've never been incarcerated, but that connection to history and our lineage and our or the folks that have come before us, and understanding that is so powerful and so important, and something that we can all learn from. And so that again just speaks to the beauty of this book. And I just kind of wanted to name that, and thank you for making that great connection there. I think speaking of being surprised and maybe not connecting in some way, one of the letters in this book that I kind of felt like I was surprised that I would resonate so closely with was this letter by Chris Begley. He's an archaeologist and writer and journalist, and he approached his letter from an archaeological perspective, which, when I saw that, I did this crazy thing. I've never done this, but I read the bios first before I read the letters. I'm like, who are these people? And, I knew some of them, but I got to Chris Begley. I'm like, I don't know Chris Begley. And I'm like, an archaeologist. And I'm like, what? So I was surprised that I resonated with this letter so much. And it's crazy because this letter was great. His letter is titled, "Read This If You Are Panicking About Collapse." And he references his research on collapsing civilizations and some of the hallmarks of societal collapse, or when societies collapse. And he highlights that even when those things are happening, the work is still important. The activism, the organizing work is still important. So he says, quote, "You are doing important, significant things, as are so many others, creating a just society, safeguarding pieces of the world around us, preserving our connections to our history, easing suffering, educating, informing, questioning, protesting, demanding change, creating beauty, or acknowledging somebody else's reality. None of that is trivial. Being part of a family or community and working to improve it for everybody, that by itself is worth the effort, no matter what is on the horizon."
Yeah.
And it's his focus on the work and the fight. That's great, but it's especially his focus on the power of community that inspired me. And so then just a little bit later in the letter, he says, quote, "I keep using the word community for a reason. Looking at past catastrophes, we see that people survive as a community, not individuals. We survive as a collective, and we have a role and responsibilities as members of a community. It will be social and political skills that allow us to make it through. How we treat people matters. Generosity, fairness, and empathy are not just favors to others. They are how we create the community in which we must live."
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like I mentioned earlier about learning more about the power of hope from Miriam Kaba's letter, I feel like I learned a lot about the power of community here. And I appreciated the connection to how important community is in the face of collapsing civilization and society. We can't ignore what's going on, and we certainly can't give up because of what's going on. And instead, we must fight against it. And we must do that with our community, with our people, and bring them along. And we have to do it for our collective liberation. And so, again, that, I was initially surprised.
Yeah.
But this letter was brilliant.
Yeah, I really appreciated that one too, and highlighted similar thing. I don't remember now exactly. I copied a whole lot of highlights out of the book, but I definitely had some things that I'm taking away from his letter as well that, I really, really appreciated.
Absolutely.
And this concept around generosity, fairness, and empathy are not just favors to others. They are how we create the community in which we must live. It reminds me of the concept of fractals, and that how you act in a small way is how you act in a large way. And so what you do interpersonally is what happens on a system level. And so if that's how you create your relationships, that's how you do all of the other things in your life too.
Yes.
And so there's importance in that as well, of living in those values so that they're represented beyond the individual actions you take, but
absolutely
all the other things that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good.
All right, well, let's talk about application. How do we apply this book and these wonderful letters to our day-to-day lives and work? My application comes from Kelly Hayes' concluding letter, which is called "Read This If You're Wounded and Want to Quit." And it's actually from the end of that letter. So she says, "Things that fail and fall apart aren't worthless. They're part of us. They're part of history. They're part of a learning process that continually reiterates itself across time and space as we make and unmake the worlds we inhabit, and as we are made and unmade by each other. When you are ready, I also want you to know that the work of placemaking, of dreaming out loud with other people, of struggling against intractable enemies and building what must exist is still here. It is still home. It is still yours if you want it. There is room at the table. There is a sign for you to hold. There are people ready to lock arms with you. There are battles that must be waged. There are containers that must be built. There are hopes that can be realized, and your heart, hands, and creativity are both needed and welcome. Sometimes we need to work on ourselves. Sometimes our expectations must change. Sometimes we need space to heal. But when you are ready, remember Atina's words and let them be your song. I belong here. We belong here. Wake into this, our story. And as I've said a few times here, we're all needed and invited into making the world better than we found it. And even if it's starting with ourselves and changing the small ways that we do things.
Yes.
Even if it doesn't make it beyond how we think about ourselves and the self-talk we have for ourselves, we've still made the world slightly better.
Absolutely.
And all of that is needed and wanted. And there's a lot of work to do. So, right. I think to paraphrase Ruth Wilson Gilmore, who said, what do we change? We have to change everything.
Yeah.
And so if everything's got to change, we all have to change along with it.
Yes.
We've all got work to do.
Absolutely.
In creating that change. So, well, what about you? What's your application?
No, that's beautiful application. And I particularly love the start of that where you said something to the effect of like things fail and fall apart, and those things aren't worthless.
Yeah.
And so there's lessons there to that. When that happens, there's beauty in that. That's work. That's important too. And so, because I think sometimes we can get hung up on those things when we're doing that self work, but also in our organizing work when things don't go well, or when things fail, or the victory doesn't come. And there's beauty and importance in that.
Yeah, and if everything has to change, we have to experiment to figure out how to change it.
Yes.
And so some of those experiments are going to fail because that's how experiments work.
That's true. That's science. Yeah. So beautiful application. I also took my application from Kelly's words, but I'm pulling mine from the beginning, her introductory letter, which is called Read This If You Feel Like You're Failing. Speaking of failing. And I love that letter because I feel like many of us can relate to the idea of feeling like we're failing from time to time. But I think she did a really great job in this letter of kind of summing up this moment and what we need in this moment. So she says, quote, "We live in daunting times. Wildfires and hurricanes are stripping away the worlds we knew, while soaring temperatures are making large swaths of land unlivable. Big tech, an industry bent on devouring every other industry, is now devouring governments as well. Our phones and laptops deliver endless reels of atrocity, fueling outrage and action while also scarring our psyches and our souls. From genocidal violence to the rise of authoritarianism, we are forever bearing witness, but the system has deemed our testimony irrelevant. In this era of smash and grab politics, ecosystems and futures are dismantled like stolen cars and sold for parts. To survive and cultivate meaning amid so much collapse, we have to change everything, and we are going to need each other." Mm-hmm. Which connects beautifully to what you just talked about. And so then just a little bit later in that letter, she says, quote, "To sustain this work, we must imagine a world beyond what we've been told is inevitable, beyond what probable trends dictate, and there is no certainty in that experiment." Mm-hmm. And again, it connects to what we just talked about. And for me, that imagination work and that reminder that we need each other was just a common thread through so many of these letters. But I think it needs to be said over and over again. And, we need to look out for and help each other and bring each other along and fight for each other and the world that we all need and deserve. And I think that's some of the most crucial application from this entire book and why this work is so important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Great work. All right, well, let's talk about homework. What do we want to do to continue our learning and unlearning work beyond our conversation today? My homework is to go back and reread some of these letters that we didn't talk about here today.
Yeah.
How many? We talked about 7 here, maybe 8.
And you said there were 20?
Yeah. So, and my copy of the book is full of little Post-it flags and highlights.
Yes.
So there's so much to go back and reflect on. So I want to do that.
Yeah.
I also reminded that No Cop City, No Cop World was published this year because Micah Herskin's letter is in here.
Yep.
Who was one of the editors of that book. So that's homework. And then Shane Burley's got a couple of books mentioned in his bio as well.
Yes.
So just a couple of books, I guess, to add to the stack, the digital stack.
Yes.
What about you?
No, I'm with you. I definitely am going to revisit this book. I'm going to amplify it. It's beautiful. I want to check out a few of the authors and organizers and activists that are mentioned and referenced in these letters. I talked about how Miriam Kaba referenced both Joanna Macy's concept of active hope and Joan Halifax's concept of wise hope. And so I want to go and read some of their work. I also want to check out Devin Zane's work. So Devin Zane is a anti-fascist scholar who was referenced in Shane Burley's letter that we talked about. And the quote from Devin Zane that Shane referenced was about how far-right movements and systems are fueled by the entitlements of white supremacy, which I just found really fascinating. And so I want to read that. And so those are just a few examples. There's so many, and I want to dig into all of the references throughout these letters. And it would be great, as you mentioned with your homework, to check out some of the folks, the authors of these letters themselves and what great work they've done. You mentioned Shane Burley's couple of books there. So there's so much, much in the way of homework.
There's a lot. Yeah. All right. Well, good stuff. This is a great book. I'm so glad we were able to read it.
Yes, me too.
Again, thanks to the folks at AK Press for publishing it.
Yeah.
Kelly Hayes for inviting all these folks to write letters for the book and editing those letters. And yeah, just grateful for the lessons in all of it and the ability to talk to you here about it.
Absolutely.
As well. But Damien, you're up next time.
Yeah.
What do you bring to the table in our next episode?
Yeah, so I'm going to bring a documentary to the table for our next episode. It's out on HBO, and it just came out last month to HBO. It's called The Alabama Solution. And I'm going to read a bit of the bio that I pulled, I don't think from HBO's website. I pulled it from a different website, but I thought this one was really compelling. So it's, quote, in 2019, filmmakers visit an Alabama prison to film a revival meeting. Off camera, incarcerated men whisper a message. Terrible things are going on here and being kept secret. This sparks an immersive 6-year investigation to discover the reality behind the walls of one of the nation's deadliest prison systems. Through unprecedented direct access and videos shot on contraband cell phones, the filmmakers learn from the men inside about a suspicious and violent death. The story unfolds in real time, revealing it isn't an isolated incident and that the official version appears far from the truth. What follows is a shocking story of brutality, corruption, and a system in collapse. As the men fight for their own survival, they embark on a campaign of resistance against all odds.
Whew.
Yeah, and I loved that because I think it is kind of all-encompassing of what this documentary is all about. I finished it this morning, and to say that it's shocking and visceral and real and a lot, and at times difficult to watch are all understated words, but it's beautiful. It tells a really important story about what's happening in the Alabama prison system. And there's so much that we're going to be able to talk about from this documentary. So I'm really looking forward to talking about it next time with you.
Yeah, me too. It's gonna. I haven't watched it yet, so
get ready.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Yeah,
we'll find some time to make sure we get that watched soon.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, with that, we want to thank you for joining us today. You know what I want you to do here, but in case you forgot, please follow, leave a rating or review, share our podcast with the people in your life. Follow us on social media, including Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. Check us out on YouTube and sign up and join us on Patreon to get notified about any new things we've got going on behind the scenes.
Yes, thank you for listening. And remember, it's not about us, but it is about all of us. We'll talk to you next week.